Welcome to the deep dive, where we, well, dive deep. And get ready, because we're doing a deep dive, a four-parter, on how online education as we know it came to be, and we have, like, the best guide, Morten Flate Paulsen's own experiences.
It's such a different world, right? Thinking back to, like, the early 80s, PCs were just becoming a thing people might have at home. The internet, forget it. It wasn't what we know now.
Right. So how did online education even work? It's amazing we have these sources to find out. Paulsen wrote a lot, and then there's this directory he made, Stars in My Online Education World, 1980, 1990.
Which is incredible, over 150 names. Over these 4 deep dives, you really need a feel for the network of people who made this whole field what it is today.
Our guy, Morten Flate Paulsen, he was in the thick of it. But here's the thing. In the early 80s, he was an engineer at a correspondence school.
Which, for anyone listening who's too young to remember, that was old school distance learning. We're talking mailing out physical materials.
Snail mail education. It's wild to think about. But that detail about him being an engineer is key, right?
Oh, totally. It means he wasn't just seeing these new computers pop up. He understood them. He could tinker, see their potential in a way that others at the school maybe couldn't.
Okay, so let's talk about one of his first big almost moments, because his story starts with the sliding doors moment involving a company called Micron, an entrepreneur named Lars Monrad Krohn, and get this, Bill Gates.
It's a wild ride, so buckle up. Paulsen's working at Micron, and they're designing a CPU for a microcomputer. Super cutting-edge stuff for the time. They're going to use this operating system, CPM86, put together by some of Paulsen's colleagues. CPM86, by the way, is basically the granddaddy of what we use today, the brains of the computer. Paulsen's so gung-ho about it all that he even invests in Micron. That's how much they believed in it.
Okay, so what happened? If they were so sure about this, how come we aren't all walking around with Micron laptops right now?
Here comes IBM, making their grand entrance into the PC world. They need an operating system for their new computer. And who swoops in with MS-DOS? You know, like the foundation for Microsoft Windows, but Bill Gates.
So Micron misses out, but this is huge for Paulsen, right?
Yep. Absolutely. He had a front row seat to the birth of the PC revolution. It's no wonder he was able to connect those dots with education early on.
It's like he caught a glimpse of the future. And then there's the Bill Gates connection again, right? Years later, Paulsen actually interviewed him in 1989. Got the inside scoop straight from Gates himself on why IBM went with MS-DOS. Wild.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time, huh? It's these little twists of fate that really make you think.
For sure. But we've got to keep moving. There's so much more to cover. Micron might have been a near miss, but it definitely got Paulsen's gears turning. Where does actual online learning come into the picture, though?
Well, in 1982, he starts working at NKI. Remember, no widespread internet or email yet. NKI was a correspondence school in Norway. They mailed everything out. Textbooks, assignments, the whole shebang. That was distance learning back then. Talk about tedious.
Snail mail education. I can't even imagine. So how does Paulsen start to innovate within that system?
Well, thankfully, he's not alone. He finds a kindred spirit, his longtime mentor at NKI, Torstein Rekkedal. This guy's a giant in the field of distance education. He even won the ICDE Prize of Excellence, from the International Council for Open and Distance Education. A huge honor.
Okay, so we've got Paulsen, the tech visionary, and Rekkedal, this distance learning guru. What do they do, this dynamic duo?
So in 1985, Paulsen gets his hands on a modem. For those listening who don't know, this was pre-high-speed internet, but it was the gateway to what was out there. And one of the first things he does, starts exploring bulletin board systems, BBSs for short.
Like really early online forums, right?
Exactly, like a very, very early version. Yep. But for Paulsen, here's where things click. He doesn't just see people chatting. He sees virtual classrooms, discussions about coursework, a way to combat how isolating distance learning was. He even writes an article about it, In Search of a Virtual School. And spoiler alert, he was right.
Talk about a visionary. But he wasn't just predicting the future, right? He was building it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He was fascinated by these early computer conferencing systems, stuff like EIEs and Porticom. Like, picture the online learning platforms we use now, but way clunkier, all text-based.
But still revolutionary for their time. I bet this is leading up to something big, something distinctly Paulsen.
Oh, you bet. And that brings us to 1986 and the creation of EKCO. That's EKKO. Europe's very first learning management system made just for distance education. You, dear listener, you specifically asked us to highlight EKCO, and for good reason.
EKCO. It even sounds futuristic even now. It's a great name. Tell me more about this platform.
So picture this. The first version of EKCO, Not built by some big tech company. It was built by a student at NKI, Björn Mobeck.
Wait, a student? That's incredible. That speaks volumes, not just to Paulson's ideas, but to the energy he created around them.
Oh, 100%. It was collaborative even back then. There's this great story about Monica Johannesson, who also worked at NKI. Paulsen suggests using eKeiko's built-in email to communicate. She says, email, our offices are too close.
That's hilarious. And it really hits home how much has changed, thanks to people like Paulsen. This was before the internet, as we know it was even a thing, right?
Exactly. They're laying the groundwork for a future they can barely even imagine yet. And this is just the start. There are more online learning heroes to meet, continents to cross.
This is where things get really exciting. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we've got to ask, who else was on Paulson's radar in those very early years?
Who?
Who else is helping him connect those dots between tech and education?
It's funny, right? That story about email at NKI, how everyone's offices were too close. But it also shows you the mindset Paulsen's up against.
Oh.
He saw how isolating traditional distance learning was, and that was the problem to solve, even before widespread internet.
He's focused on the social aspect of it even back then. That's so interesting. It's not just about the content, but the connections.
Exactly. And this brings us to another fascinating character, Berge Holmberg. He's a big name in distance education. And in 1986, before really going all in on online, Paulsen decides to take a correspondence course from this guy.
So even our tech-savvy pioneer did the whole snail mail learning thing. That's kind of reassuring, actually.
Right. But here's the thing. That experience, it was a turning point. The slow feedback, the lack of interaction, it really showed Paulsen the limits of the traditional way, solidified his belief in what tech could do.
He lived the problem he was trying to solve, in a way.
And remember those computer conferencing systems he was so into? One in particular caught his eye, ConnectEd. It was an early online learning platform, and in 1987, guess what? Paulsen takes a course there, taught by, get this, Paul Levinson.
Okay, now we're really getting into a who's who of online learning. What's so important about this ConnectEd experience? The course itself, the platform, or was it the people he met?
All of the above,
Yeah.
honestly. It's Paulsen's first time doing international online learning, connecting with students and an instructor from all over. And he wasn't just theorizing about it. He felt the power of these platforms to actually build community.
Even back then, so he's not just thinking about tech as delivery, but as this way to build those human connections that are so important for learning.
And don't forget, this is all pre-user-friendly anything. These systems, they were clunky, text-based. You had to really want it to make it work.
Which makes you appreciate those early adopters even more, right? They saw the potential and they stuck with it.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of people ahead of their time, we got to talk about Andrew Feenberg.
Okay, who is Andrew Feenberg and what makes him stand out, even in this crowd of innovators?
So get this, 1982, PCs were just starting to show up in homes, right? Feenberg was already running a fully online program, using computer conferencing as the main way of teaching. The main way.
1982, seriously, that's like a decade ahead of everyone else. I can't even imagine the logistics of that back then.
It's mind-blowing, right? Dial-up, limited bandwidth, text only. Feenberg had to be so resourceful. But it worked. Paulsen even said Feenberg was one of the first to really get how much online learning could change things.
That's huge. So even with how much tech has changed, the core ideas, the good teaching, it was there from the start.
Exactly. And Paulsen's soaking it all up. But he's not just learning from others, right? He wants to share what he's doing too.
Which is why he's such a good guide for us, right? He bridges these worlds, the tech, the teaching, and then, as we'll see, the global aspect too.
Exactly. And speaking of global, remember that ConnectEd course he took? The one Levinson taught.
Yeah, what about?
One of his fellow students, a Norwegian guy named Søren Nipper.
Okay.
It shows that even back then, online learning, it was for everyone. Søren was a police officer. This wasn't just academics hiding in computer labs.
That's a good point. It challenges the stereotype, for sure. It was people from all walks of life looking for something different.
And Paulsen, with his background, he gets that. Both the tech, A&D, the education side. But get this, in 1988, he makes a big decision. He goes to his first ICDE conference.
ICD?
International Council for Open and Distance Education. Huge deal. It's the event for distance educators worldwide.
Okay, I'm picturing it. 1988, online learning is still brand new, and Paulsen's at this massive gathering of the people who are into this stuff. That had to be so exciting for him.
It's a total turning point. He goes from this relatively small pond at NKI to being surrounded by hundreds of like-minded people from all over the world.
It's like a crash course in the global state of online learning. Who are some of the big names he meets there? And how do those encounters shape his thinking?
Well, remember how impressed Paulsen was with how Levinson built community in that Connect Ed course? He actually got to meet Levinson in person at ICDE.
Wow, what are the chances? Did they geek out about online community building?
I'd like to think so. It really highlights how those early relationships formed through those clunky systems would eventually lead to the sophisticated online communities we have today.
Imagine being a fly on the wall during those conversations. It's incredible to think how far things have come since then.
Absolute was.
It's really inspiring to hear about all these people who just got it, not just fiddling with new gadgets, but actually trying to make education better for everyone.
For sure. And Paulsen, who shared that goal, he must have been blown away by what he saw. It's like a sneak peek at the future, where it doesn't matter where you are, anyone can learn.
It's giving me goosebumps. Okay, so Paulson's on this whirlwind tour, meeting heroes, seeing the future. What's it all adding up to for him?
Put yourself in his shoes. It's 1987. You spent the last few years building EKCO, trying to make online learning less lonely at NKI. And then you meet all these incredible people doing amazing things in North America. It's a lot.
Exhilarating and probably a little overwhelming, too. He's at the very edge of something brand new.
And it lights a fire under him, for sure. He goes back to Norway, energized, inspired, ready to take everything to the next level.
With a suitcase full of ideas, I bet. But we know this isn't the end, right? He's about to head to the U.S. himself to get his doctorate.
Oh, yeah. The Penn State chapter is coming. But before we get there, we got to rewind a bit. Remember those computer conferencing systems, the ones Paulsen loved? Well, one of them, Porticom, had a surprising link to Norway.
Oh. What's the story there?
So Porticom, it's invented in Sweden by Jacob Palm, another computer whiz. But get this, Porticom was being used by this big distance learning school in Norway, NKS.
NKS? No way. Paulsen must have known about that, right?
It's not clear if he knew right away, but it's still a big deal. It means even before EKCO, people in Norway were already trying out online learning.
It's like these parallel universes of innovation suddenly colliding. Makes you wonder who else was out there doing their own thing, not even realizing others were on the same track.
Right. It shows how collaborative the whole thing was even back then. People wanted to share what worked, learn from each other, and push the limits together.
It's like even with all the tech, it still comes down to human connection, to working together to make things better.
100%. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've already covered a ton about Morten Flate Paulsen, his early days with computers, creating EKCO, his trip to North America.
And we've met so many people. It's amazing to think, despite clunky tech and sometimes skeptical colleagues, they were dreaming of this future where education could be better, more open, and they made it happen.
Their passion and vision, it's incredible. And we owe them a lot, right?
Absolutely. And this is just the beginning. Next time, we're off to Penn State with Paulsen, where he'll meet even more online learning rock stars, do some groundbreaking work. It's going to be good.
So until then, keep those learning caps on, everyone. Ontario it is. North of the border they go, and who do they meet? Linda Harasim.
No way. The Linda Harasim. Her book on online collaborative learning, it's like required reading these days.
Right. And this is 1987, remember. She was already doing amazing work researching how to use computer conferencing for, like, real group learning. Building knowledge together, that was her thing.
And this is way before Google Docs, Zoom, all that. What did Paulsen take away from meeting her, do we know?
We don't have the transcript of their conversation, sadly. But what we do know is Paulsen was hugely into her ideas about collaborative learning. He even started using her term knowledge building in his own teaching. He was hooked.
It shows how seriously these pioneers took the design of online learning. It wasn't just, oh, let's slap a lecture online. They were trying to invent something totally new.
Totally. And that focus on collaboration, the community aspect, it's a constant for Paulsen. He knew that was the magic ingredient.
It's not enough to just deliver content, right? It's got to be engaging. People got to feel connected.
Exactly. And this is where their next stop comes in. They're not just on a meet and greet tour, right? Paulsen wanted to see online learning in action.
So they're visiting schools, right? Places actually using this stuff.
Yep. And one stop blew their minds. The American Open University. Get this. They'd already gone all in on online learning.
The American Open University, first time I'm hearing of it. Was this like the early version of MOOCs?
Funny you should say that. They were founded in '84, so just a few years old when Paulsen visits. But they're already using it all. Computer conferencing, video conferencing.
84. That's crazy early to be that advanced. Who was behind it all?
A guy named Ward Deutschman founded the place, was president. Talk about a visionary. He believed in his gut that tech could make education accessible to anyone.
It's so cool to hear about all these people who just got it, Not intimidated by the tech, but really driven by what it could do for people.
For sure. And Paulsen, with how much he cared about that too, he had to be impressed. It was like a sneak peek at the future of education. No boundaries, anyone can learn.
Okay, goosebumps happening over here. So we've got Paulsen back in 87, fresh off this whirlwind tour. He's met all these amazing people. What's going through his head at this point?
Picture it. You've spent years building eco, trying to make NKI's online learning less lonely, and now you've seen the best of the best in North America.
Yeah, exhilarating, but maybe a little overwhelming too.
Totally. But it definitely lit a fire under him. He goes back to Norway, energized, ready to take things even further.
Like he's got jet lag, but also idea lag. He can't wait to put it all to work.
It wasn't just one person, right? It was this global community, everyone learning from each other, building on each other's work.
It's like even with all the tech, online learning, at its heart, it's a very human story.
The most human story.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive into Morten Flate Paulsen's world, his early days, the birth of eco, that incredible trip to North America. We've met so many amazing people, pioneers, all trying to make education better.
And they did make it better. It's amazing to think about their impact.
For sure. But this is just the beginning. We've got more deep dives to come, more of Paulsen's story to tell. Next time, we're off to Penn State. He'll meet even more online learning legends, do some of his most groundbreaking work.
The plot thickens.
It certainly does. So until next time, keep those minds curious, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.
Future books in this free series will also be available via Morten's blog site, www.nooa.no or researchgate.net. Other recent books by Morten Flate Paulsen belonging to his series, My Online Education World 1980 to 2020, are also available through his website or researchgate.net. This interview closes with a photo of Morten overlooking the town of Kragerø in Norway. We hope that you enjoyed this interview and encourage you to check out Morten's recent publications. Links to these publications and a transcript of this interview are added in the comment section below. You are welcome to contact Morten through his LinkedIn account. Thank you.